here we go for round 1, and I'm going to take a risk here by drawing first, and the reasons for that are that I expect to be forced into some amount of mulligans because of our mana base. It's really easy to open up a hand that's effectively unplayable simply because of the mana. Not the amount, but the color requirements of our deck. And second of all, our 3 and 4 drops are super efficient, and we have 2 creatures to make up for the loss in tempo in Elvish Mystic and the Mana Sliver. So yeah, going to draw first. Hopefully that keeps us off some mulligans and makes our Mind Rot better also. And we already have the Elvish Mystic, so I'm quite happy about the additional card. Also a very easy keep here with double green, double black. Pretty much perfect. Exactly what we want. Let's see what we are facing. Plains is a good sign. Usually the white decks in the format aren't the greatest, although there are some good white decks, of course. My favorites being the ones that combo off with Angelic Accord, but you can build white aggressive decks with Master of Diversion as one of the best cards. And then of course just having great rares and Serra Angels also helps. White also does have pacifism, so one very efficient way to remove blockers. I'm not the biggest fan of white-green, but let's see what our opponent has in store for us. Looks like a sliver. I'm not looking to block with Elvish Mystic, I believe. Let's see, if the Sentinel Sliver attacks next turn, is there any kind of trick I would want to play around with the Tusker? No, I think it's more likely that I want the double black if I draw a double black spell, so I'm going to tap the Tusker here. This also represents Ring Flash, although leaving the Mystic untapped would have represented Giant Growth or Ranger Skull, so that would have been equally fine. Don't really want to see Predatory Sliver here, because then Sentinel Sliver is a 3/3 on its own. But we would probably just have to block and accept the fact that the Tusker dies. With this course of action, I'm going to go on the offensive with the Tusker. At least as long as our opponent isn't holding up Celestial Flare mana or anything. Simply because we have the very efficient Undead Minotaur to hold the fort. We could even block Capacian Knight and use Ranger's Guile to time walk our opponent. I think I like it better to just hold on to the Ranger's Guile though. If our opponent wants to deal 1 with the Knight, that's fine. And if he wants to spend his turn 4 dealing 2 additional damage, that's more than fine as well. There's always the possibility that Sentinel Sliver decides to go on the offensive as well, signaling a trick from our opponent, but that doesn't look to be the case. Yeah, no, this is the decision I talked about. I think I'll take it here. And like I said, if our opponent is activating, then we are actually quite far ahead. And it's not going to be difficult to dominate the Knight. Charging Griffin is interesting. It's really weak to Blightcaster, but we don't have anything yet to trigger the Blightcaster, so that's something to keep in mind. The evasion on Charging Griffin forces me to be a bit more aggressive here than I would like, especially because we haven't really drawn anything super relevant. But now at least any enchantment in our deck is a great draw. A play that's important to keep in mind against Compulsion Knight is that once you double or triple block it, your opponent usually doesn't have enough mana to kill every one of your blockers, and that means this is the easiest way to get rid of a Compulsion Knight. I'm going to use Ranger's Guile here. This is just too good of a trade not to take. We get to keep our Blightcaster, and we hold off Sentinel Sliver and Compulsion Knight for the turn, only taking 3 damage from the Charging Griffin. And that allows us to be aggressive. And we are currently easily winning the race, so I think that was a great trade. Voracious Worm. So Blightcaster is definitely at its best here. Can't really complain about Blightcaster when all your opponent does is play 2/2s. Now, Colonian Tusker could get double blocked by Sentinel Sliver and Voracious Worm, but we don't know if our opponent would be willing to do that against a green deck with 3 cards in hand. On the other hand, he might just be desperate enough to do so anyway. I could Hunt the Weak the Colonian Tusker, which is interesting because 4/4 is exactly the power that I need to get through this board. On the other hand, I can't do that pre-combat because I want to kill Charging Griffin, and then Colonian Tusker just trades with either the Worm or the Sliver. So let's offer a different trade here first by attacking with Undead Minotaur, and then I'm just going to Hunt the Weak post-combat. Usually it wouldn't be a great idea to trade your Undead Minotaur with a 2/2, which I just offered. But in this case, anything that allows my Colonian Tusker to get through more easily is good for us. Our opponent is reaching the mana for Enlarge, but the fact that we have an Elvish Mystic on defense means that it is going to deal some extra damage to us, but it doesn't allow our opponent to attack more efficiently or anything. So even though it's a great card, it won't bother us too much. Let's see. No attacks. Compulsion Knight's still only 3 powers, so Colonian Tusker can attack here. If it trades for 2 creatures, I think we are fine. Drawing Fire Shrieker is also pretty good here. I think I'm just going to equip the Tusker and see what happens. That could be Celestial Flare, which we could play around by equipping Undead Minotaur and attacking with that as well. Don't know how much I like that though. Let's see. The Tusker, if our opponent doesn't have the Celestial Flare, the Tusker is absolutely amazing. It's forcing a jump block, effectively. And the Undead Minotaur trades with Compulsion Knight, even if it has a Fire Shrieker, but we are much safer from the Celestial Flare. Yeah, I think we are reasonably far ahead that we can afford to play around Celestial Flare here a little bit. I really don't want to lose my 4/4 Double Striker to a Celestial Flare. Oh, Naturalize. That's also good to know, because this turn our opponent doesn't have a good block for the Minotaur, so we basically dealt some extra damage here. Main deck Naturalize, that's pretty crazy, and very good against us. So now if our opponent has the Celestial Flare, he gets the Colonian Tusker. I'm fine with that. We are quite lucky that there isn't a third plains for our opponent, otherwise the Knight would hold off anything we are trying to do here. I debated attacking with all my creatures, but his block of Compulsion Knight on Blightcaster and double block on Colonian Tusker is still too powerful, I think. We are running into a Fortify here, which is effectively the same as the Celestial Flare. Opponent is going to make his Compassion Knight 4/1. And he blocks with Voracious Worm to be safe against combat tricks, which is a nice line on his part. The score is 16-8, so this Deathgaze Cockatrice is threatening quite a bit of pressure, and I don't see the Compassion Knight beating that in any way. Also, if our opponent draws lands, he's going to get a 1/1, but I have a feeling that drawing lands isn't going to get our opponent out of the position he's in. It also means that he is a lot more likely to play his lands, which gives us some nice information. This attack is interesting because he has no blockers left for our 2/3s. Now, Compassion Knight could grow pretty large if our opponent drew a Giant Growth, for example, and then we would lose both of our creatures if we blocked with Undead Minotaur and Blightcaster. We can block with all 3 of these in order to make sure that the Compassion Knight dies. Let's see, if there's a Giant Growth which gives the most power, this is going to be 3/6 power, yeah. But no, then it doesn't die because it has 4 toughness. Yeah, that doesn't work. Blocking Spore Mound against a Giant Growth is also pretty bad. It's not clear to me what our opponent is trying to do. He didn't think a long time or anything before making this attack. So it could really just be that our opponent wants to get as much damage in as possible, then pumps twice, drops a land so that he has 3 blockers again. It wouldn't be completely unreasonable to play that way. I think I'm going to respect the fact that he could have anything here and not block, giving me more information, hopefully. Okay, no pump on the Knight. And a Rumbling Baloth. So, yeah, there wasn't a trick involved at all. Our opponent just knew that he would get at least 1 card with the Compassion Knight. Another Undead Minotaur. Well, we aren't attacking, and I'm going to continue to try to ride this bird to victory. And our opponent can't really be too aggressive. Otherwise, we are just threatening to win on the swing back. Especially if he draws a land, then we can... Well, it doesn't really matter if he draws a land or a regular ground creature. We can... Okay, yeah, this isn't an unreasonable attack. I think that our opponent should have a land here. But of course there could be a trick as well. I'm just going to block with my ground creatures because they aren't serving any purpose with the Compassion Knight on defense anyway. And our opponent actually drew into a Giant Growth. Yeah, but that's fine. Like I said, our goal here is to stay alive. And we are threatening lethal in 2 turns. So our opponent can still draw out of this. But currently we are heavily favored to win. Oh, going Spore Mound into Rumbling Baloth into Giant Growth, which we played around the turn before. Wasn't the worst combination of cards. Okay, opponent didn't top deck a solution here, otherwise we would have been in trouble, of course. So, white-green slivers of a sword. We could bring in the Abomination. It's a 4/6. Child of Night wouldn't have been completely unreasonable because our opponent has all these 2/2s, but, well, playing 2/3s is still the better call, quite obviously. Not gonna want Shrivel. Gonna keep in the Fire Shrieker and the enchantments. Our opponent has Naturalized, but we can't do much about that. We saw a Pacifism, but that was about it, so I'm not too keen on my own Naturalize here. I think that most of the cards that we have are really good. The Into the Wilds is questionable, and yeah, Mind Rot isn't the best against a deck that's looking to empty their hand really quickly, but I still like it a lot in this format. The Abomination is the one card that I'm considering, maybe instead of Into the Wilds, although I don't want to weaken the Blightcaster. Yeah, I have a feeling that we should just leave it like this. If all these creatures here aren't big enough to dominate what our opponent is doing, then something has gone wrong. And a 4/6 for 6 won't change that generally. Let's see if our opponent chooses to play first. Yeah, he does. Oh, that's nice. I think being on the draw with this deck, especially if we have Elvish Mystic in our starting hand all the time, is really nice. And in Core Set Limited, being on the play and mulliganing is really bad, which happened to our opponent. Whereas we have the lucky draw of perfect mana again. And we kind of know that Elvish Mystic is going to survive also. And that just means that we are going to be putting on as much pressure as possible with Witch Stalker, and then we have Lifebane Zombie at some point. Well, we can't even cast all our 3-drops quickly enough. Gonna look at our opponent's hand with the Lifebane Zombie and then decide what to do. I think we can easily raise the Compassion Knight, especially once we drop a Root Walla to block. Then our opponent is forced to pump once. And maybe we can also use the Ranger Skull to good effect. Charging Griffin or Predatory Sliver? Charging Griffin is definitely more scary for us. And we won't need the Ranger Skull back up here anytime soon, so let's get in with our rare, our first rare. We have the two hate rares, hating on blue, black, and white, green, respectively. Only just noticed that. So Elvish Mystic is of course not attacking here, bringing our opponent down to 10, and I want the Root Walla in play, simply because it deals more damage. It's possible that our opponent is going to be forced to stay back with Compassion Knight at some point, and then the game is effectively over because we have the Lifebane Zombie that gets through thanks to Intimidate. Here, this is kind of awkward. The Compassion Knight can grow up to a 5-power creature, so we can't block it. Maybe I should have played Root Walla and Colonian Tusker. Could have been too conservative to keep open Ranger Skull here. But the reasoning was that I wanted to have a blocker next turn anyway, so I wasn't all that likely to attack with everything I had. Might have been a mistake though. These are some great attacks, I feel like. Witchstalker is going to be blocked by 1 Predatory Sliver, because otherwise our opponent is just dead. Yeah, this is a good attack. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's something that I suppose works as well. Could use my tricks here, but I think I'll just do this instead. And now kill 1 Predatory Sliver The only thing that we have to keep in mind is that we don't want to lose here, obviously. And I think our best bet is to just drop both of our creatures, blocking the Compulsion Knight next turn, and then we Ranger Scale the Lifebane Zombie to get through for lethal. And if our opponent has drawn a Pacifism for Lifebane Zombie, then it's kind of sad that we didn't protect it, but then we are threatening lethal with both Witchstalker and Kalonian Tusker through Ranger Scale, and our opponent could only play around that by playing Pacifism on the zombie, but then staying back with everything, and that's also not winning him the game, so we were very safe here. Like I said, I probably should have played the Tusker one turn earlier, but overall, that was a pretty nice matchup to start off with the draft with. See you next round.